We will wait for a few more seconds and then we'll start. Welcome to Therapeutic Thursdays, where we dive deep into therapeutic approaches for individuals on the autism spectrum. Today, we are honored to have with us Kassandra Clemens, a passionate advocate and neurodivergent individual with a wealth of personal and professional experience. Kassandra brings a unique perspective to our discussion today. As someone who navigates autism, combined attention differences, and dyspraxia, Kassandra's journey is rich with insights and understanding. And the past 19 years, she has dedicated herself to working with neurodivergent students, leading her to establish Heal Your Confidence in 2023, a platform specializing in holistic, person centered support for neurodivergent adults. Drawing from her own experiences and expertise, Kassandra is deeply committed to supporting autistic individuals in understanding themselves and the world around them. Today, she will shed light on attention variability in autism and explore strategies for promoting personal growth and empowerment. Join us as we embark on a journey of understanding and growth, guided by her profound insights and unwavering dedication to the autism community. So, here further handing over it to you.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be with you. Just a little bit of perhaps foundational information. I'm talking about individuals as autism as being part of the individual rather than being added to the individual. So keep that in mind. If you see that differently, please forgive me, but this is important to understand as we go through the workshop. And I think that's all I need to say. So because Krisha has already summarized everything. So let me share my screen. Okay. Can you see that all right? Can I just check that?
No, not yet. We can't see your screen.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, now it's visible.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So let's start with relaxing into the topic. And if you are autistic yourself, then I'm sure that you will understand all the things I'm going to say in the next few minutes. If you're not autistic yourself, then just try to put yourself into the shoes of an autistic individual. My work is all around autistic adults. However, some of the things that I'm saying will definitely also apply to children. So if you are parents, I hope you can take that away with you. And also one of my case studies is about an autistic child. So let's just start very informally. Please raise your hands if you believe in the importance of a full and successful life. Thank you. Raise your hand again if you desire self-confidence and happiness. Thank you very much. So what might be happening for an autistic person? Let's just think about that for a moment. So if I will say you, as if you were the autistic person. So as I say, put yourself in the shoes of an autistic person if you're not autistic yourself, or if you're not sure whether you're autistic. So maybe you believe that you can do everything, anything, but your attentional differences keep getting in the way. Perhaps you desire a healthy engagement with the people around you, but you struggle with attentional lapses or rigid attentional patterns. Potentially, you feel drained after social encounters because you feel that you have to mask who you really are. And your attention is wandering in and out of the situation. Possibly, you know that you are intelligent, perhaps highly intelligent and very capable, but you feel out of step with yourself and your environment a lot of the time. So what is that likely to amount to? Well, probably there are very high levels of anxiety, of stress, frustration, potentially anger at yourself, at the world. Very likely you put conscious or subconscious limits on what you can achieve. And you allow other people to determine your self-worth, thereby creating an external locus of control instead of keeping that control within yourself. So where do you want to be? Well, you want to feel comfortable in yourself. You want to be able to be in situations and master them, not because you have got everything in place put there by other people, which is very nice, but you would like to feel that you're in control of the situation. Visualize being able to do what you love and love what you do, achieving great results. Picture a time when you're congratulated by your family, by your friends, by your colleagues for the wonderful things that you achieve. Envisage, being able to be in situations that you previously found extremely challenging, and you are there being yourself. Feeling victorious, feeling the master of yourself and the environment. So how do you get there? Well, I found in my experience that you get there by knowing how to harness your attentional differences, variabilities, to personal growth in various ways. And we will be talking about that in particular during the case studies. So the attention challenges that are very often linked to autism are overfocus, hyperfocus, or underfocus, which is hypofocus. Selective attention, wandering in and out, or only attending to the kind of things that autistic person, it's very individual, that autistic person is interested in. Rigid attentional patterns, very difficult to get out of a particular mindset, a particular way of looking at things. Then sensory sensitivities are the kind of things we find very, very difficult to live with, literally. They very often lead to breakdowns, to avoidance, to meltdowns, and in the best, in the best scenario, to a lot of pain. So things like loud noises, light that we can't deal with, like overhead strip lights, for example. Smells, crowds of people, very often a difficulty. Loud music, it could be all kinds of things. Again, it's very individual. And then difficulties with executive functions, for example, planning, organization, impulsive behavior, doing more things, doing more than one thing at a time, and so on. So to sum it up in many ways, we can think about social attention, self-reflection, focus, cognition. These are the areas. So in social attention, very often the problem is missing important contextual clues in conversations. Difficulty reading faces and reading body language. Reciprocal conversation can be made very difficult then. In terms of self-reflection, the ability to question oneself can look or can seem to be reduced. Processing criticisms can be very, very, very difficult. Creating and pursuing personal goals can look like look nearly impossible in the face of all the difficulties that you might have encountered, or that an autistic person might have encountered. So in terms of focus, we've got distractibility for the reasons we already mentioned. And meltdowns don't need to be big meltdowns like in children, meltdowns that we even see. It could be something that happens completely quietly, like a person having to pull over in the car and having to wait until that wave of grief, of pain, of the feeling one cannot at all deal with life anymore passes again. So we might not be witness for in an adult situation at all. It's only the person who knows and those who do understand through their own experience. So these are the areas that you can easily read up on, that are often cited. You know, they come up in assessment reports, they come up in support situations. However, there are some fallacies with this. The first one is discrete labels: autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia. What we are learning more and more is there is a big overlap. Individuals can have a bit of this and a bit of that, sometimes coming out that one label might be perhaps the main one, while others are traits. Or we can also combine major labels, and such as dyspraxia and autism. There is a very high overlap, and there's also a very high overlap between ADHD and autism. And interestingly enough, everything I said so far in terms of attentional variation also applies to ADHD, perhaps not to the same degree, but you might have seen that yourself, heard that yourself. You might even have a dual diagnosis already. It is something that we are starting to really look into, what's actually happening. Are ADHD and autism discrete conditions, or might they be even the same thing with different variations in it? The other fallacy, and I call it a fallacy because we know very little at the end of the day, is the assumption that we are looking at a disorder. As I said before, we might be looking at a disability because, you know, the more autistic someone is, the more difficulties they might actually have, and some of them might be disabilities. And we do know that it can also combine with physical disabilities or cognitive inabilities. So we do know that, of course. But the fallacy is around the idea that it's definitely an impairment, because we cannot know that, especially with what we used to call Asperger's, because we start in the middle. We start with when we see symptoms, but these symptoms have been growing within an environment that didn't allow that child and then that person growing up and the adult to be who they are with the right kind of educational support. And we're not just talking educational support, we are talking about, to some degree, also neglect, because the brains of an autistic person the brain of an autistic person does work differently, and we know so very little about it. So what would happen if you could find the right kinds of educational processes to support an autistic child in the way that their brain works? We don't know anything about that. We also don't know how the assumption of disorder actually impacts as we go along. I'm not sure whether you have heard about that before, but there are studies now, mounting studies, about the impact of being ridiculed, being belittled, being told that we don't attend properly, that we should do that better, that we just don't try hard enough. All of these things actually amount to a huge number of criticisms week in, week out. And it has been established that the connection between that and mental health is considerable. The other fallacy that we have just in the last years become aware of is that we always thought about autism in the light of what we call gold standards of assessment. And what has transpired is that this gold standard of assessment is very, very biased to a particular type of male autism, which meant that anybody else who wouldn't fit within those criteria wouldn't be diagnosed. Research is trying to address that, but at the moment there is no known and accepted DSM-5 criteria for female phenotype. So professionals are trying to use more gender-friendly or non-gendered questionnaires on top of the usual questionnaires. And the other fallacy actually is that we call it female phenotype, which is very understandable because it's mainly what we have found out is that women just fall between the cracks and haven't been assessed because they didn't fit into that scheme. However, it is not just a female phenotype. It is a phenotype that is different from the accepted traditional male phenotype, which means that it's impacting men as well as women. So now we're talking, the talk is linked to personal development. And there are two areas, main areas of personal development I want to draw your attention to, because in the case studies, they will become more obvious. Personal growth, of course, that's in the title of the workshop. And authenticity. Now, let me just stop right here because my screens are actually used up. I have got two screens, they're both used up with the presentation, which means I cannot see any questions that have come in. So please forgive me. I will answer them once we finished the workshop. Because if I go in between, what you can see will suffer because the screens will just reduce again to the ordinary PowerPoint. So I just wanted to say that because I just realized I can't see the chat box. Okay. So we've got personal growth, we've got authenticity, excuse me. So have a look at personal growth first. So it's the process of continuous development. While continuous might not be the right word because obviously it goes in spikes to some extent, but we call it continuous because it is moving on. It is something that keeps developing, or at least that's what we hope, what we try to achieve. And I think in terms of autism, that applies to everything, even a severely disabled child. We want to see some kind of development, and it could be all kinds of things. And very often parents find they are quite surprised, happily surprised by some kind of development. So we would improve various aspects of our lives, become a better version of ourselves. Yeah. So that's what we are trying to aspire to. We create and reach goals, and we overcome challenges as well. Now, in terms of authenticity, there's one more. So gaining new experiences is part of that. And we integrate that into our personalities. That's what we would expect, yeah, if we talk about personal growth. Now, in terms of authenticity, that is part of personal development, but very often overlooked in our society. It's very, very closely linked to self-esteem. So a person can show a lot of personal growth, but it doesn't mean that their self-esteem is growing with it or in the same rate. So that is why a lot of people, autistic people, everyone who might look very successful, might still have a lot of mental problems, emotional problems. So we want to keep that in mind. So authenticity then is about being true to oneself. Now let's think about back to the disorder paradigm, all the negative comments that are coming in. It's very difficult. What happens is that a lot or most autistic people will mask who they are for very, very good reasons. It's not safe to unmask for most of us in many situations. We do know that it's held against people in terms of work very often still. We recently had a meeting where we discussed autism and employment and seeking employment, and only, I think, 3 in 10 autistic people are employed in any way. And several people were saying that they disclosed at work and they would never ever do it again because the consequences were devastating. They either had to leave work or they were actually fired. And it was directly linked to some extent. I mean, it's always difficult to say, but it seemed to be very much linked to their disclosure. So it's not always safe. And it's also not safe necessarily in friendship circles, in groups that we enter, because there is still so much stigma involved, you know, which might then be ridicule, or people just not giving us our due for who we actually are. So being true to oneself is more about being true to yourself. It has been found that autistic people who embrace being autistic have much less mental health problems. So research has shown that. And that's why it's so important. And of course, there might be very good friends, there might be family members, one can also be much more unmasked with, but just keep that in mind. Masking is not a black and white situation of masking and unmasking. It has got a very, very big gray zone. And I think quite rightly, a lot of people understand that and are careful. We should be careful because we don't want to put more burden on ourselves. So we want to embrace our own genuine thoughts, feelings, values, and beliefs. And very often they are so deeply buried after a lifetime of experience. A lot of autistic people now are only diagnosed later in life. So there is a lifetime of experience of burying who we really are, what we really think, and it's important to keep that in mind. So this is linked now with the masking, unmasking, expressing them openly and honestly in interactions with others. So it will reduce us trying to be what other people want us to be or what we believe other people want us to be, because this honest exchange of what people actually want to see, how they want to interact with you, is quite fraught with dangers. You know, do we dare? We have to unmask to some extent to actually talk to others about it. So we don't even know whether or not they would be embracing us as we are if we would dare to be ourselves. So you can see already, you can hear that we are entering very, very difficult questions, and they can't be easily answered. And it's also very, very individual. You know, one might have a very strong autistic personality within a very difficult, complex, possibly, excuse me, you might hear the motorbike, sorry, a possibly damaged environment, or a relatively weak autistic personality, always looking for other people's approval in a very strong environment that can help them to, so to speak, come out of their shell and share quite safely. So living in alignment with one's true identity is what I meant when I just said that research has found that people who embrace their autistic self and are happy with themselves, and in fact quite happy with everything that their autism brings to them, even the difficulties, because they find ways of addressing them, or they have the support to addressing them. So we live in a society of pretense, don't we? It's not just about autistic people, it's not just about neurodivergence. We live in a society that pretends so many things, which is part of the problem that an autistic person faces, because what we don't understand is that pretense. So when we pretend, it's because we use it as a mirror to what we observe. Does that make sense? We are not pretending for pretend's sake or because we want to fit in, having learned all our childhood that you do things in a certain way. We do it because we observe other people doing it. So we try to fit in that way. That's quite important. So if we start avoiding pretense, we can avoid a lot of things that are not helpful to us, but at the same time also not cause us problems with other people. I have been working with various autistic people across the lifespan, not young children, but across the adult lifespan. And one of the things they would usually say is, I studied very carefully how the people around me would react in certain situations, and I made that my own. That's a very typical thing for a female phenotype individual to say. So interestingly enough, it's now thought that a lot of autistic people, males and females, are in professions where that observation is coming in extremely handy. It might be academic life, it might be healthcare professionals, doctors, psychiatrists, a lot of therapists, which is very interesting. We are unlearning a lot of the things that we always thought we knew about autism. Because if you think back to the attentional variations, one of them is hyperfocus. Now, a lot of us can hyper-focus on other people's behavior. And over time, we see the patterns, because pattern recognition is also very often quite strong. Some of us know that, and we use it in our work to very good effect. But many of us are not aware of it, that we are doing it. We had to do it in order to survive, because one can only have so much criticism before either one finds ways around it or crashes. So suicidal ideation is very strong amongst autistic people. We know research is showing it's very, very strong in female autistic people, but I think we can generalize that across the autism spectrum, but perhaps particularly those who fall between the cracks and don't get assessed. Maybe it's stronger there because there is some kind of protective measure once you know, and you can say to your boss, or you can say to your family or to your friends, look, now I know why I'm different from other people. So there is definitely some protection in that. We don't know enough about it because all of these things are fairly new, and it will take a few more decades, I think, before we can really reach definite conclusions. Thankfully, more and more of the researchers are autistic themselves, so I think we are starting to ask the right questions. So this ability to observe is very important for a lot of us, and we are using it in various ways. However, as long as we are not aware of it and not aware of that we can use it, it stays very much a kind of disabling. It's disabling, because what people would say to me, and what I know for myself as well, so I've got autistic traits myself, is that in a social situation, we very often try to find somebody who will do the hard work for us and we just tag along, which of course is not something that makes us feel better. Yeah? It's a dependency which we want to overcome. So with the authenticity, we can overcome that dependency because we have self-advocacy. So one of the things that came to me when I was preparing for this workshop, it should have been a workshop, I'm sorry, I just can't see you, so it's more a presentation, and then we will have hopefully quite a long time where we can talk to each other. So the treasure chest analogy came to me while I was thinking about how can I put across a different way of thinking about it. So, and the treasure chest came in mind. So the treasure, the chest of the treasure, it's a strong thing, it's a strong box, which contains all the rest. I liken it to to our personality. It's an unalienable birthright to be ourselves. Now, it seems like people are stealing from our treasures a lot. People are messing around in it. People take away, people try to put something in, but actually our personality belongs to us, and we should recognize that. And it would be lovely if society would recognize the importance of personality belonging to the person itself or themselves. So in that treasure chest, you have got lots and lots of coins, and that is the attentional currency. You also have got treasure, special treasure, like jewelry, which is a unique strength that everybody, anybody, doesn't matter how disabled, brings to the table. Everybody has got some kind of unique strength. It might not be something huge. It might not be something that you have to call superpower, but it's definitely something that makes that person special and also allows them to bring something into their environment and into their lives and the lives of others that enrich that environment. And then we have the chalices. They're not always found in a treasure chest, but my treasure chest has got the chalices, and that's the social interaction. So what we are doing to some extent, we are actually turning things upside down here, because what I'm contending is that the social interaction is the part that can actually harness attentional variation to that success story. Can allow us to become much more authentic, happier, more successful. So let's go into that. Again, the case studies will actually showcase that in a much better way. So Heal Your Confidence, the company that I founded to serve neurodivergent individuals, we have got a transformational perspective. So you look at attentional patterns, but you add, instead of a disordered approach, you add a strengths-based interaction approach. And you do that through linking brain and heart. I go into that a bit more. How do we do that? How do we link the brain and heart? Hopefully it will become clearer. Now that helps to refine or to build and refine authenticity. And that leads to enhanced self-compassion, a very important element. Without self-compassion, we cannot have any healthy self-esteem. And even so, the title of our talk here is self-confidence. Did I say that? I'm actually not sure. Well, at least the title of my business is Heal Your Confidence, because I thought heal your self-esteem doesn't sound quite right, because many of us actually are not quite sure what that means. It's the underlying ability to cope with life and to know that we have got a personality that belongs to us. So the stronger the self-esteem, the stronger, the healthier the person is. The less self-esteem, the more we are starting to suffer. So it's, for example, what is it called? Just gone out of my mind. I have just mentioned it a moment ago. Ideation, that's what it is strongly linked to a low self-esteem. And research has shown that neurodivergence as such has an impact on self-esteem. It usually decreases because of all the criticisms, of all the questioning of who we are, not being well enough, not being good enough, being disordered, and so on, is impacting on our self-esteem. It's lowering it, and lowered self-esteem is directly linked with mental health problems. And I might not have mentioned that, but I think autistic females, for example, are 4 times more likely to succeed in taking their lives. Also, it has been found that even young children already start suffering and have suicidal ideation much, much higher than you would expect in the general population. So these are very important questions, very important issues that we need to start talking about. So this brain-heart connection is very important. And I just want to also put the author there. Okay, so let's go into this case studies. But before we do that, I would like to say a little bit more about the heart-brain connection. This is where scientific not improvements as much, but advances are coming in. Science is starting to show us many, many things that nobody before actually believed to be true or believed to happen, simply because we weren't able to actually observe what's going on in the brain, what's going on in the heart. So that has changed over the last years, but it's still very difficult to actually find the evidence for that. Because you will find the various bits in different articles, and it's quite difficult to get it together into one coherent whole. But what science is doing now, it's allowing us to link the dots between previously contradictory phenomenon and actually showing that together they start making sense. And a very, very important one here is the heart-mind connection. What that means is that the heart and the brain, rather than the mind, so the brain is more than the mind, but the heart and the brain are actually two parts of one system. You know yourself that when you are criticized, unduly criticized, when you are put down, what shuts down is the heart, because you just can't live with it. You know, people who keep a very open heart very often in those situations, in traumatic situations, typical childhoods, divorce, failure in education, in the work arena, very often get ill, actually, because the heart just doesn't know how to deal with it, especially if we haven't been taught strategies to keep strong under adversity. Excuse me. So, but what we now know is that the heart acts like a second brain. It's not just the brain pouring or sending neurotransmitters to the body, to the heart. It's the heart as well that continuously sends neurotransmitters to the brain. And when that is a good working relationship, we can really very quickly and very successfully address mental and emotional dysfunction. So, and this is what the case studies are about, and I hope you will enjoy them. But I realize, because I can't see the chat, what I'm going to do, I'm going to the last of my slides. And I just introduce you to the success formula, which I put together many years ago when I was still working with students, with neurodivergent students, because so many of them were suffering from lack of self-esteem, from lack of confidence in themselves. And what I discovered was what I just said before, that the self-confidence is very, or self-esteem is very closely linked to self-compassion. And that used to be, it seemed to be a very, very hard thing to help people to understand, because they were so hard on themselves, and they're still very hard on themselves. I know it for myself as well. We have a tendency to be very hard on ourselves. So self-compassion is not easy to help people to understand and to accept. However, the success formula, interestingly enough, I know I discovered then, and as I know now, you know, experience has shown me it's true, is the first component to a real success story. So we're not talking about being successful in some of the arenas of our life. We are talking now about being successful in embracing ourselves for who we are and creating a successful life through that. Next one is goal setting. That will lead to clarity. And once we've got that clarity, we can focus. Now, remember, we're talking about attentional variations. And that always equals positive outcomes. It doesn't matter whether it's a little bit of positive outcome or whether it's great success in the outcome. It's always leading to an improvement. So I'm going to stop share. Okay, so now I can see the chat, and let me just see. So I hope I get your name right. Kaustub is asking, how can autistic individuals discover his or her skills? And we go into that a little bit. One of the case studies in particular is about that. And then we have got Sandra Fox, who is saying 8 neurodivergent to within same way. Right, okay, good. So let me talk a little bit about, before we go into the case studies, a little bit about the attentional variation or variations and how we sometimes think about that perhaps not quite correctly. So we know that hyperfocus can be extremely useful. It's when it is excess, when it is taken to excess, then it becomes limiting. So many autistic people have said to me, it's actually the it's the ingredients for my success that I can hyperfocus. Other people have said that they feel that in downtimes, you know, where we think it's under focus, a lot of issues become clear to them if they can relax into it. So it's a different way of intelligence. And again, it's a question of finding the strategies around that. And the strategies, we have got strategies, and some of them will become available through the case studies as well. And if you have got any questions a bit later on, please let me know. We've got a little bit of time. I think I can go up to 2:45. Let me introduce you to the case studies. So the first case study is about quite a disabled child, born very disabled, very quickly diagnosed as autistic and spastic. And the doctors gave her up. They said she is a shell, she will never be able to amount to anything. And the mother, who didn't want to accept that, the father accepted it, the mother didn't want to accept it, and she was actually told by the doctors she was delusional. Now, the mother would just work with the child. She would massage the child, she would talk to the child, she would carry the child, she took the child everywhere that she went. And then when the child was a little bit older, she was able to crawl and to start walking. She would do all of that, but she was mentally still withdrawn. One of her relatives said, if you looked into her eyes, there was nothing there, or you couldn't see that she was part of the environment. She would be somewhere else completely. And that didn't change until the mother decided that she would look around and see what might be available. And at the time, that young woman is now in her early 30s. At the time, the dolphin therapy became well known. So the mother put all of her savings, all of her financial capacity into taking the little girl on a regular basis once a year to swim with the dolphins. Now, the first time that the child swam with the dolphins, she would enter the water as this child who could use her body to some extent. She was still spastic, but she could use her body quite well, but her mental capacity was not apparent to the outside world. She left the water connecting. She had connected with the outside world. She was able to be part of her environment consciously. And that got better and better with every time that she went into the water. Now, what happened there? We know that dolphins are creatures that help people to find their heart. So I think I'm not far out when I say that probably that is what happened. That child grew into a person who is still disabled, no question about it, but she lives in a community, within in a house with other people, within a whole village. She works, she talks, she tells you how she feels. You can have a conversation with her to some extent. She is very happy, and she will never leave the house without making everybody else laugh. And she has got an uncanny ability to assess a room and make a beeline for the most unhappy person. And she will not leave them alone until they show some sign of improvement. Okay, so that is Katarina. That's Katarina's case study. A second case study is about a father and child. The father, as a child, never got picked up as being autistic, but we now know, looking back, that that was probably the case. He couldn't read before he was 9, but then he started reading very easily, very fluidly, with a lot of joy. And by the age of 11, he couldn't deal with school anymore. He was bullied. He also was bullying others. It wasn't working for him. So his parents took him out of school and sent him to a private school where he had the opportunity to choose what he was going to do for just 1 year. And he chose not to go into any classroom, but to just spend all the time in the grounds building things. After the year, he went back to school into his regular class, never looked back, never had any problems. Sam is now a very successful engineer and is co-owning a big company. His daughter, Lisa, was never suspected of being autistic until she was 10, I believe. Looking back, it's clear that there were many autistic signs. Her behavior, the way that she looked at the world, the way she sometimes completely zoned out, the way that everything has to go her way, very rigid. Now, Lisa has been taken out of school and is recovering now. And hopefully, in some time, she will be able to learn more about her autism and go back to work as well. So what happened here is that through Lisa, Sam actually linked himself with his autism, which totally changed his world. So, his love for Lisa helped him to accept himself in a new way to help Lisa. And then the final case study, I have to be quite quick now because we are running out of time, is about a 40-year-old person, man. Let's call him Ramesh. He's actually Indian. He was very successful because he had all opportunities, all educational opportunities. He found very, very good mentors. He was very successful, earned a lot of money, but something was always bothering him. It just didn't fit in. He had difficulties at home with his wife and his children. And then he got fired from his job. The whole world crashed for him. And what we found was that he was applying very rigid ideas to every part of his life. He had also come to not believe in himself anymore. He basically made worst manager of the year in his company, got a lot of bad feedback. I realized very quickly that he was one of my coaches. I realized very quickly that he was a very, very logically minded person, not unusual at all in the autistic community. But what he did not do, he didn't apply his logic to his feelings. Now, we have realized in the last few years that autism is not incompatible with emotional life. Quite the opposite. A lot of autistic people have a very strong emotional life. But he didn't see the link. And once we started to work on that very, very, very quickly, everything improved for him. So we started with his personal life to apply very simple things like asking his wife for her opinion before he came in with his solutions. Very simple things, not very difficult at all. And then we applied similar ideas to his work life. 3 months later, he has a better job, he earns more money. Through the process, he found out what he really loves to do and found a job that allows him to do that. So we've crossed 43 minutes. I think I leave that here. He's a very happy person now. His family life is happy, and he is known in his old company and the new company as the best manager they ever had. So I leave it there, and I'm inviting questions. Are there any other questions? So Kastrup asked, how can an autistic individual discover his or her skills? Sometimes I think we probably need some help with that, you know. Children are very free. Children tend to give us a really good feeling of what they love, what makes them happy, where they thrive, where their attention is really well placed. It's more difficult for adults. So I would suggest find some support, someone you can talk to who gets to know you and can help you to link your mind, your heart to what you really feel and what you really want to do. Now, the skills aspect can be fairly easily added. It's much more difficult to find out who you really are and what you want to be and what really interests you. I think in terms of attentional variability, it's very, very important to actually find that focus. What is it that you really want to do? Because then the attention can merge with that in a much, much healthier way. Does that answer your question? So there don't seem to be any other questions for the time being. Please feel free to ask while we are still here. So I think what Sandra meant is that neurodivergence as such is about the same principles. Yes, and I completely agree, because we don't even know whether something as discrete autism actually exists. So Anna is asking, can you explain more about hyperfocusing and how to work with it, please? Hyperfocusing is very often linked to what we used to call ADD, which means there isn't enough energy there. And it's very difficult to deal with, actually, if it is a very intrinsic situation, possibly linked to dyspraxia, getting very tired, low energy, very strong energy fluctuations, but on the lower end. What we have to find out is whether it's that, or whether it's hyperfocus because behind that is an autistic temperament, or somebody who actually learns through feeling much more than through thinking. So if it's more the feeling aspect instead of the thinking aspect, then we can start to actually encourage the person to bring a bit more of that energy outside, to become more aware of it, because very often these processes are not clear. Even so, the person might look for an environment that is very artistic. There might not be aware at all that how that links to their hyper-focused personality. So once they know that, they can start working on trying to link those two things. So one of the things that I have done with people before is encourage them to bring that energy out of it, to talk more about what's going on inside, and to possibly put that also into something physical, like drawing it or creating something with their thoughts in mind, or with their inner life in mind. If it's more linked to dyspraxia, to low energy, then we need to work on that. So we can work on bringing more energy into the body. This goes beyond of what we can do today, but you can do exercises that very consciously bring energy into the body, and that can make quite a difference. I used to be tremendously dyspraxic. I still have to rest quite a bit, but I would also be physically very, very dyspraxic. And that has changed a lot since I have been starting to do these exercises. So we can do something about that. So we have to start on the energy bit, I think, more than anything else, unless it's trauma related. That needs to be found out through a constructive discussion. So Kastrup has come back. You mentioned careers where attention or hyperfocus is required are good for an individual in the spectrum. Do you recommend jobs in that fields to be considered? If you have a tendency to be hyperfocused, yes, you will be needed. One of the things that we don't talk enough about is how those unique talents are needed in the world. The world has been brought to the brink of ruin, really, and potentially research is only starting to look into that, but potentially neurodivergence might have soared. There's always at least 15% or so, but it might have soared because we are in very difficult times. We are needed. Our particular strengths are needed. So the strengths-based approach is very important. So yes, if you are a person who can hyperfocus, look for jobs that allow you to use that. Same thing with everything else. Think about people who have selective attention. Well, there is an analogy you can think about. So if you think about weaving cloth, making the cloth for carpets or for clothes or whatever. So the only person who needs to have a continuous kind of attention is the weaver. Nobody else actually needs that, because the person who is looking for potential faults just looks for that. The person who is thinking about creating new patterns looks from a top-down place. They are not interested in the continuous weave. They're interested in how their perspective, their ideas might make one whole, one whole picture on that cloth. So I think we often think about it has to be a certain way, but nobody has got continuous attention. Not one person on this earth has got continuous attention, because our attention goes always on and off, because that is how it's sustainable. And we are not thinking about that enough in education, in the way that we work. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question or something that I haven't explained well enough? I think we might still have a few minutes. Okay, so there are no more questions, apparently. So we can finish the session unless somebody wants to ask something else.
Okay. Hi, the session was super amazing. Thank you so much for giving so much valuable insights. So, as we come to the end of today's Therapeutic Thursday session, I hope everyone in the audience found our conversation with you as enlightening as I did. Your passion for advocacy and your experience as a neurodivergent individual has undoubtedly provided us with valuable insights and therapeutic approaches for individuals on the autism spectrum. So thank you so very much once again. And until next Therapeutic Thursday, let's continue to explore, learn, and support one another on this journey. Thank you so much to all the lovely audiences for sending in your questions. And until next time, thank you so much. Meet you tomorrow. Okay, Dr. Kassandra, I may take a leave, and the session was definitely great. Also, if anybody would be interested to get in touch with her, they can just leave the comments down below, and we will definitely get in touch with her, or else we'll just leave her email address or her website link in the comment section, so anyone can directly get in touch with her.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Have a nice day.